was. I mean, this literally kicked it all off. Dr. King was 26 years old. Remember, you really had the year before with the Brown versus Board of Education decision coming down. You had previous events, but all of these things began to converge. And what took place in this city, 52,000 black people chose not to get on buses. That was a huge undertaking that I think we can never forget. And what it has done is also created the blueprint, if you will, for how do you create mass change? How do you create momentum? How do you have unity when it comes to boycotts? And so that was another thing that we talked about today, how what took place here really served or continues to serve as a blueprint for how, as African Americans, we move forward to address many of our critical issues. I want to bring in my panel right now, and of course I have folks here. Michael Imhotep, host of the African History Network show out of Detroit. He joins us. Candace Kelly, legal analyst, joining us from New Jersey. Matt Manning, who is a civil rights attorney at Corpus Christi, a Howard University graduate, but you never know that typically on this show. So glad to see Matt deciding to represent Howard today. It took him some time to do so. Michael, I want to start with you. Because Montgomery really is critically important. And the thing that we try to do today is not focus on Montgomery, what took place then and everything then, but really bring it forward because the reality is when you start looking at what's going on, again, just this week in Alabama, the canceling of 2 magazines on the campus, one targeting African Americans, one dealing with women. Supreme Court decision yesterday allowing Texas to move forward the racist gerrymandering maps. In Indiana, the Republicans in the House move forward a 9-0 map. Republicans have 7 seats in the state. Democrats have 2. Moving forward with a 9-0 map, wiping out the congressional district of Congressman Andre Carson there in Indianapolis. Texas getting rid of the hub for disadvantaged businesses, minority women businesses. We could go on and on and on and on and on. And I have continued to say this. We are seeing a massive attack to defund Black America. And so many of the things that folks we thought had been settled, if you will, with this boycott and others over the 13-year Black Freedom Movement, we are now having to refight and relitigate many of those battles. This generation has got to be fortified and be ready for this fight.
Absolutely, Roland. And not only does this generation have to be fortified and ready for the fight, they have to study the previous years that led up to where we are today. They have to study the previous fights. One of the mistakes that was made, and I'm going to get into the Montgomery bus boycott because I've studied it and thought about it. One of the mistakes that was made is that we thought the fight was over, but Jim and Jane Crow had children and grandchildren, and they're continuing the fight of white supremacy. And this is what many people don't understand. So the Montgomery bus boycott was a huge victory, and it also comes out of a struggle and tragedy of African Americans, inspired by the lynching of Emmett Till, August 28, 1955. We know Rosa Parks on November 27, 1955, went to a meeting where Dr. T.R.M. Howard spoke about the lynching of Emmett Till because they were informing more people about it and trying to gain evidence in that case. So we know that the lynching of Emmett Till also helped spark the modern-day civil rights movement. You talked about Brown versus Board of Education. When we studied the Montgomery bus boycott, we know they had a 3-pronged strategy. They had the bus boycott and mass rallies. They had a legal strategy, and we know the lawsuit of Browder versus Gale was filed in February 1956 by Attorney Fred Gray, who you interviewed on the show. And then they had the mass rallies as well. So they had this 3-pronged strategy. And unfortunately, and one of the things that happened was because of the Brown versus Board of Education, because of the U.S. Supreme Court case, they felt that if they couldn't get justice in state court in Alabama, because of the Alabama state constitution in 1901, they could go to the federal court. They can go to the U.S. Supreme Court and get justice. So a lot of people mistakenly think that it was the bus boycott for 382 days, as you stated, that ended segregation on the buses, even though that weakened the bus company and the city. It was when the U.S. Supreme Court, when they exhausted all of the appeals, and the final word came down in November, I think it was November 20th, 1956. That's when the bus company and the city acquiesced. But it's a huge victory, and it lays a foundation for us today. And lastly, there was a internet that went kicking off the modern day civil rights movement. You have the African liberation movement taking place nationally around the same time, and we were being inspired by one another. Africans on the continent of Africa were being inspired by us. We were being inspired by them as well. So this is a fantastic lesson that has to be learned from this.
So, Candace, when I made the point about what we have to understand challenges today, there are clear and direct attacks on legal groups when it comes to this battle. What this Supreme Court has decided, this Supreme Court has said, hey, what the hell, we're going to make new law. They don't care about precedent. And again, I talked to yesterday, head of law spirit of civil rights under law, Damon Hewitt, how there's a case going forward where it says third-party groups won't even be able to sue on behalf of voting rights. And so people really need to understand. I'm talking about folks, not just people who are 18, but African Americans who are 5 and 6 and 8 and 10 years old, that what is happening right now in this country, public policy-wise, what's happening in the courts, is going to have profound impact over the next 50 years for education, for health, for academics, you name it. And so when we look at this movement lasting 13 years, beginning in Montgomery, going from 55 to 68, setting up the next 50 years, was this conservative attack right now on civil rights, human rights, economic rights, could have the reverse effect for Black Americans for the next 50 years. Folk had better wake up and understand what is at stake right now.
They should. And, you know, one of the things, you know, I hear reverse of me. One of the things that people also need to understand is, like you said, that you have to teach young people the way to get to the power is through the court system. We learn this lesson very late. Yes, we learn about legislative and executive and judicial branches as we go through. But in terms of how it really is going to be effective, in terms of how it really plays out, this is something that some people never learn. And this is something that people are learning on their phones now because of the algorithm. And that's a good thing. But the younger that people understand what's going on, the better it is. Because the truth about it is that anything that we are trying to get in this country eventually ends up in the court system, which is why we have to pay attention to the judges, why we have to pay attention to the local school boards, because those people on local school boards climb up and end up being judges and senators and legislators. The other thing that we have to realize, and this is what happened during the during the boycott, is that it's going to take some time and it's going to take people to give up something. Right? There are people who wouldn't be outside in the cold where I am in New Jersey for 30 minutes, let alone walk 8 miles the way that they did years ago in terms of the bus boycott. What is it that you are going to give up in order to make sure that justice is going to be served to everybody in the community equally? The other thing that people have to realize, number 3, I think, is that there is something called discretion. These courts could have at any time, of course, given Black people, women, anybody, disabled the right to do what they wanted to do, but judges have discretion. And we have to learn how to use that discretion to our advantage and show people that when it comes to what's going on out in the streets, that we are going to fight over and over again, because the court of the public opinion, as we see, is making a difference in the real courts. So that's something that we have to play on very, very well and make sure that our messages are heard. And we understand that our messages are being heard because look at Target. When we talk about a blueprint, this is something that people understand. Of course, it's a little more diverse in terms of the people who are part of it, slightly more fragmented, but we see even with the fragmentation that there is progress that is being made, because we hear about Target every week and things that they are doing. We just have to keep going until folks acquiesce. You got to tire them out.
What we have to understand, Matt, is that, again, it's amazing when folk talk about the elections, critically important, whether we talk about city, county, state, school district, national. But when we talk about the civil rights movement, we talk about Montgomery, there would not be a Montgomery Bus Boycott story if the Supreme Court doesn't rule in the plaintiff's favor. You don't have an education victory if the Supreme Court does not rule in the favor of Brown versus Board of Education. We could go on and on and on. Then when you talk about all of the legal challenges, the fight to enact Brown versus Board of Education, then, of course, the protests and the marches and all those different things, what did you have? You had a court system that ruled in the affirmative for black folks. Now, conservatives saw that, and they were angry. You look at Barry Goldwater, Senator Barry Goldwater, Civil Rights Act, 1964. Many Republicans, conservatives before that, supported civil rights. That changed. You have people like Charlie Kirk and others who believe the 65 Civil Rights Act, the 64 Voting Rights Act should never have been passed. What we're facing now is the absolute opposite. It's a 180 degree. What you had then was you had activists who had belief in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court and the federal courts sustained that. What you have now, though, is the reverse. You now have a Supreme Court that literally has no respect for lower court decisions. The fact that a lower court would rule in Texas 2-1, the Fifth Circuit 2-1, that was clear race involved in the creation of the new map, and then you have the Supreme Court say, forget that. They had no hearings. They had no oral arguments. They just said, we're going to sit aside what the lower court said. Hey, we don't believe the plaintiffs can actually make their case. So what this Supreme Court is doing is they are just discarding district judges and lower court rulings and appeals courts and saying, we, the Supremes, since we are the final arbiters, we know what's best. And that's the big difference that we are now facing, because these folks, I mean, today they said they were taking up the case against with Donald Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. That's been set on law in the 19th century. And so this is absolutely a completely different time we're living in with this rogue right-wing MAGA Supreme Court that Reverend Frederick Haynes called the MAGA Six.
You're so right, because, people don't realize that the Warren Court was a court that issued a lot of opinions that made our life as we know it now in terms of the rights that have been recognized and the precedent as it relates to civil rights. They put it in place, during that time frame. So you're exactly right. And it's interesting that you say that, because I think it requires a recalibration of strategy, right? I mean, the Supreme Court takes 1% or fewer of cases that are sent to it on petitions for certiorari, so, cert petitions. And that means now that you're going to have to hope that the district judges, just like this district judge in El Paso, are going to hold the line, are going to do the right thing, and that the Supreme Court doesn't take a lot of these cases up, because we can't trust that their decisions are based in morality, based in the truth, based in the law, and not based in blatant partisanship, because that's what we're seeing. So, the strategy is going to have to be recalibrated. And, I think you're speaking to a larger phenomenon that we're kind of all seeing, is that there were these guardrails, at least purported guardrails in society, one of which was the courts, that you could trust, at least theoretically, the courts would look at the evidence, try to do the right thing. But you're seeing blatantly now that the top court in the land is not doing that. And that necessitates the question of what do you do? Because, look, even with Brown v. Board of Education, as everybody knows, there were actually two Browns, because people did not adhere to the Supreme Court's ruling. But the difference at that time is that there was deference given to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court was at least going to try to do the right thing, even if we didn't agree with its ultimate outcome. I don't think we as a society have that fundamental belief anymore. And that now requires us to take a different legal strategy with respect to district courts, and hoping the district courts and the courts of appeal in a lot of places, not necessarily the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, are going to do the right thing, and that the Supreme Court is not going to take questions up because we can't trust how the Supreme Court is looking at it. So I think you're exactly right about this inflection point that we're at, and I think it requires lawyers and the public at large to recalibrate that strategy, because that's the only way you're going to have meaningful wins, especially when the Supreme Court appears to be looking at very clear evidence and making decisions that are blatantly partisan. For instance, the immunity decision. I mean, in the Warren Court or in the Rehnquist Court even, I don't think that they ever would have issued an opinion basically giving the president carte blanche to do whatever he wants and calling it part of his job, essentially. But that's what we saw this Supreme Court do, and that requires us to soberly look at our strategies going forward.
Visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for this new 10-week online course. So we're going to teach this on Sundays, normally 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're running late today. So as soon as I finish this broadcast, I was going to start the class about 5:30 p.m. today. Because it's a holiday weekend, I'm going to do a quick introduction to the class so you could join us for that. The class is on sale, $80. You get 5 of my lectures free in digital download format, okay, when you register for this as well. Click right here, register here. You can do debit card, credit card, what have you. If you want to do it through Cash App, send it through our Cash App is here, $ the AHN show through Cash App. You click on the link. It takes you here. And if you send it through Cash App, follow it up with an email. You can email me through the website right here. Contact the African History Network at the top. If you send it through Cash App, follow up with an email. Let me know you sent the registration through Cash App. And this is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. These are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts that have been stealing money from us. I'm still trying to get them shut down. Here's our PayPal link right here. Also, okay. So this is African empires, the Moors, and the transatlantic slave trade, 5000 BC to 1800 AD. Okay, so this is a new 10-week online course that I'm teaching. I've been teaching online history classes going back to 2017, and I put these classes together, put together the curriculum. There are about 200 slides in this class, 80 to 100 articles that we reference, 15 books. You don't have to buy any of the books. I'll show you screenshots of the book as well. The content is PG-13. You can use this with your children, okay? And it's very engaging. It is interactive also. There's a class chat, so you can ask me questions in the class also. You can see me, I can't see you, so you don't have to worry about that. All right. Okay, look, we're about to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace. Also, you can support the African History Network through PayPal and Cash App. We have the information right on the homepage of my website. If you scroll down, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN show. This is our Cash App. Tag $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. Okay, these are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts that have been stealing money from us. And I put our tag right here. Here's our link to our Cash App QR code. Okay, so you can support us there if you want to donate support us $5, $10, $15, $25, $50, $100, whatever it is. It definitely helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, pay some of the bills, and broadcast the Sunday night show also. And here's our link for PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN.